Thank you very much for coming to the Life is for Living online learning series. This session is the second last in the series before Christmas, and then there are plans afoot to run again from January 2021. It's a mixture of formal and informal learning sessions. So today, our session is with Marcus. Marcus Ward is a member of the Relationship and Sexuality Working Group, and he's going to be examining the effects of Spina Bifida on sexuality. So thank you very much, Marcus, for coming here today and for presenting to our members. So I'm going to hand over right here now in just 1 second. I'm going to make you the speaker and you can share your files. Just 1 second now. Okay, thank you again, Marcus. So I'm going to mute my own video and I'm going to mute myself.
Thanks very much, Katie. So just to give a brief introduction to this webinar, my name is Marcus Ward. I am a member of the Relationships and Sexuality Working Group with SBHI, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I am very passionate about disability and sexuality. It's something that I feel needs to be talked about more. And I have completed a course called the Foundation Program in Sexual Health Promotion. So I do have some formal training in sexual health education and promotion as well. So that's just a few words about my background in this area. So I will now turn off my camera and I am going to share my screen. Okay, so bear with me now and I will present the presentation. Okay, so the title of my webinar today is examining the effects of Spina Bifida on sexuality. So we are going to be taking a look at Spina Bifida and how it affects all parts of someone's life when it comes to sexuality, both physically and emotionally as well. So a brief introduction into the area. Sex and disability are two things that are sometimes seen as incompatible in our society. However, many people with Spina Bifida are living very happy and healthy sex lives. Others with the condition may have some doubts, concerns, or knowledge gaps around sex. There is a lot of useful information out there for people with physical disabilities on topics such as managing continence, sex positions, sex toys, etc. And I would like to bring some of those to your attention in this webinar. So, as I said there, I'm sure anyone watching will know someone with Spina Bifida, or many people, and it's important to remember that there are many people out there with Spina Bifida who are embracing their sexuality and living very happy and healthy sex lives. So I want to try to bring this topic to, I suppose, a wider audience in SBHI and raise awareness of some of the other issues that some people may not be too familiar with. So this, on the second part of that slide there, it's a definition of sexuality, a working definition of sexuality from the World Health Organization. And that's a central aspect of being human throughout life, encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, and reproduction. Sexuality is experienced and expressed in thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitudes, values, behaviors, practices, roles, and relationships. While sexuality can include all of these dimensions, not all of them are always experienced or expressed. Sexuality is influenced by the interaction of biological, psychological, social, economic, political, cultural, legal, historical, religious, and spiritual factors. So, as you can tell by that definition, sexuality is not something that is specific. It's a very broad, extremely broad issue, extremely broad topic that there are so many different aspects to it that you could talk for hours on end about it, and so many different ways to even define it, and it means something different to everyone. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. This is just a quote that I found that I really liked, and it talks about accessibility when it comes to sex, and it's by a guy called Andrew Gurza, who is he's a Canadian disability awareness consultant and also a sex and disability educator. So the quote is, when we talk about accessibility, we only ever mention things like ramps, push buttons, or lifts so that someone with a mobility device can access a space. I wondered why we never ever talk about what it might mean for a disabled person to have access to their own body or their sexuality. So I really like this quote because it encapsulates another aspect of accessibility that even myself wouldn't have thought very much about, that access to your own sexuality is something that many people can take for granted, but it's not something that everyone has access to, at least all of the time. So Andrew Gurza is someone I admire, and he has a fantastic podcast as well where he talks about disability and sexuality, and he is extremely open about his own life. He's a gay man, and he talks about his own experiences, and also the let's say the whole world of disability and sex, and yeah, he has a fantastic podcast called Disability After Dark. If you get a chance to check that out, it's fantastic. Okay, so the aim of this webinar is to help you gain a better understanding of how having spina bifida can physically affect someone's physical and mental health, and therefore impacting their sexual health. And as well as that, I'm going to be giving some advice on managing these physical and mental or emotional issues, okay? So moving on to the next slide. What is sexuality to you? What is sexuality to you in the center of the screen? And around the talk or the speech bubble, I have made a random list of words that are connected to sexuality in some way, and these are words off the top of my head essentially, but there are so many different words that we could include here. As I said before, sexuality is such a broad topic, and it means different things to different people. And so what I would invite you to do is have a read of some of the words that I have put on the screen and ask yourself what do they mean to you? Are they something that are those words appealing? Are they not appealing? Are they something that you enjoy or don't enjoy, that you've taken part in? Just have a think to yourself, and as I said, there are many different words that you could never even fit on the page, on the slide. And so what I would ask you to do now is I would ask you to have a think of some other words. If you've got pen and paper, great, but if not, that's no problem. If you've got pen and paper, you could write some more words down, and you're just going to keep them to yourself. And the aim of this activity is to get you to think about what sexuality is to you in your own personal life, because it is such a personal thing, and it's not something you have to share with anyone if you don't want to. But I do think it is important to acknowledge and define it in your own life. So, as I said, those are just some of the words that came to mind for me, and I tried to include words from different areas of sexuality. You know, whether it be a sexual act, or whether it be self-esteem, how you see your own body, or how the world sees you as a person, whether it comes to gender identity or sexual orientation. Those are huge aspects of one's life as well. Okay, so I will move on now. Okay, so taking a look at some of the physical effects of spina bifida on sexuality. The first one, bowel and bladder incontinence can cause insecurities during sexual activity for people with spina bifida. So this is quite a common issue I see for people with spina bifida and other physical issues or physical disabilities as well, is when the person has to deal with incontinence of bowel and bladder, they are nervous of what can happen during sexual activity, and it can be very difficult. It can be very frustrating. But yeah, so the bowel and bladder, if this spina bifida is causing issues like that, it can cause embarrassment, and so it's important to find a way to deal with that. And I will speak about that a little bit later on as well. The second point there, most people with spina bifida are fertile and can have children. So I've come across couples with spina bifida, both people have spina bifida, and also where one person has spina bifida, and they've had children. And so yes, the majority of people with spina bifida are fertile and can have children. Now there may be some let's say challenges for a pregnant woman with spina bifida, but those are something that will have to be discussed with the doctor, and a GP, for example, will refer you to someone if that is something that you would like to think about or know more about. Okay, so the next point there is some men with spina bifida have trouble gaining or getting an erection and or reaching orgasm. So depending on where the lesion is for someone with spina bifida will determine how how successful the man will be in getting an erection and reaching orgasm, climaxing. So I've heard different men say different things when it comes to this, and Age is also another thing that will determine this for a man as well. It's just a fact that as a man gets older, they are more likely to have issues with getting an erection and reaching orgasm as well. But that's within the general population, and is no different for someone with spina bifida. And the next point there, women may also have altered sensation in the sexual organs, depending on, again, where the level of the spina bifida is. And also the something else that will determine this is if someone is a wheelchair user with spina bifida, then they are more likely to have certain issues around sensation and orgasm and all that sort of thing. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So puberty. Puberty can often begin early for adolescents with spina bifida, and that's called precocious puberty for anyone who wasn't aware. And so this can happen earlier than it does for their peers who don't have spina bifida. It can happen quite young. I've heard of people with spina bifida beginning puberty at 7-8 years of age. I'm not a doctor, so I cannot say what is the average age that the spina bifida population will start to go through puberty, but it is often earlier than for their peers. And the next point is limited mobility may make certain positions more difficult. So certain sex positions will naturally be more tricky to manage if someone with spina bifida has limited mobility, whether that be someone who's a wheelchair user, whether it be someone who uses crutches. They may find it difficult to get into certain positions in bed. Next point, certain medications can also affect sexual function as well, okay? I didn't want to put any specific medications here because, as I said, I'm not a doctor, but it is something that obviously can be discussed with your GP if you are put on certain medications and you feel that maybe your sexual function is altered in some way since you began those medications. So that could be something to discuss with your GP or with your urologist even, or any other medical practitioner that you would be seeing. Okay, and the last point on that slide, people with spina bifida may see their bodies as different and so have to deal with certain body image issues or self-esteem issues. That's something that many people have to go through. In the general population, as I say, in wider society, when we're growing up, especially, it can be difficult sometimes to love our bodies for what they are. And when a young person with spina bifida, I went through this myself, looks at themselves and they see themselves as different physically, different to others in in their classroom, for example, or in their friend group. And that can cause certain psychological issues, and it can be tricky for a young person to have to deal with that. Okay, and I will just move on to the next slide. Okay, so a look at some of the mental health impacts from spina bifida. So the first point there, bowel and bladder incontinence, sorry, that should read incontinence, can lead to frustration for people with spina bifida, especially if their partner is not understanding of the issue. So if you can imagine being in a situation where someone with spina bifida is, having sex with a new partner, new boyfriend or girlfriend for the first time, and that person isn't really aware of the side effects or symptoms of spina bifida, that can be a tricky situation to navigate. And if the person isn't aware of bladder or bowel incontinence that the person may be dealing with, then that will involve a lot of communication. It can also lead to the person with spina bifida feeling ashamed or nervous, anxious about having sex with someone new, especially because it's something that they may feel makes them different to everyone else, and so it's important to have an understanding partner as well to um, make the person at ease, and feel that the incontinence is not an issue that will put them off. Okay. And the second part on that slide, body image insecurities can lead to anxiety and frustration, and therefore can put someone with spina bifida off exploring their sexuality or with a partner, by themselves or with a partner. So especially if a young person is going through body image insecurities, as I said before, they can feel anxious or frustrated by seeing themselves as different, even though their friends or peers may not care at all that this person uses a wheelchair, for example, or whatever it may be. And it can put them off feeling like they want to explore their sexuality, um, either by themselves through masturbation or whatever, or with a partner in sex. So those are two of the impacts on mental health. And moving on to the next slide, a lack of disability-specific sex education can leave teenagers with spina bifida feeling nervous, alienated, and uneducated around their sexuality. This is something that I went through myself as a teenager. The sexual education program in my school was very poor to begin with, and that was made more difficult for me because there was no disability specific or spina bifida specific sex ed. And so I was taught that I was taught about sex between two able-bodied people, but I was never taught about what to do if you are a wheelchair user, if you have body image issues, if you have bladder incontinence or bowel incontinence. That's a huge gap in disability, or sorry, in sex education in Ireland and in many other countries as well. And that, as a young teenager, coming to terms with their own body, learning about their body, can be a difficult thing to have to go through when you are not taught about your own body and how that will impact your life as an adult. And the second point on that slide there, LGBT people with disabilities face something called double marginalization. That simply means that they face prejudice or discrimination even on two fronts. So they can face discrimination for being part of the LGBT community, and also having to deal with ableism and prejudice because of having spina bifida. Disabled people are often viewed as either non-sexual or hypersexual, and so queer people with disabilities can be portrayed as having unhealthy sexual lives. So this, as you can imagine, must be very, very difficult for someone, especially if they aren't totally comfortable maybe with their sexuality, or they even don't feel that the people around them don't feel comfortable about that them being gay or lesbian or bi or trans, and so that can cause a lot of frustration as well, a lot of alienation and feeling alone, a lot of loneliness, because of having to deal with these two things that should not in any way impact their life, but unfortunately does in some ways when it comes to how people view them in society. And the other issue there on that paragraph is hypersexuality or non-sexuality. So disabled people are often categorized as either one of these two things, and there is a perception that there's no in between for people with spina bifida, that we're just regular people living regular lives, and our sex lives are quite regular as well in many ways. So I just felt that was a very, very important point as well to get in there. Okay, so how do we get around these issues? Despite various challenges around sex and sexuality that people living with spina bifida may face, there are many things that can be done to address them. Let's now look at some of these supports and resources. Okay, so this is not an exhaustive list of supports and resources, but it is some sort of it's a good starting point, I believe. So the next slide. It is important that adults with spina bifida speak to their healthcare providers, healthcare professionals, about issues around sexuality. This can include things like sexual functioning, contraceptives, and reproductive queries or questions. Some of the relevant healthcare professionals include: now, the first port of call, your GP, will have experience with issues around sex. You will have dealt with many issues on sex, he or she, for many of his patients. They may not be an expert around disability and sexuality, but they will be able to refer you to one if they know one. But they will also be able to research a consultant or an expert in the issues that you're dealing with. Okay. Secondly, urologists are also knowledgeable about the male and female urinary tract system and the male reproductive organs, the penis and testicles. So for men especially, urologists are healthcare professionals who are quite well trained in issues around sexuality, because they are the same issues that are talking about issues around urology, such as going to the bathroom essentially. So your GP and urologist, first of all, are two very good contacts when it comes to these issues. And so moving to the next slide. Gynecologists are trained in managing the health of the female reproductive system, the vagina, the uterus, and ovaries. So for a woman with spina bifida, they're trained, gynecologists are trained to help with issues around the female reproductive system, and so sexuality is something that it can be talked about with a gynecologist when it comes to maybe things like fertility, or issues around maybe pain as well. So there are a lot of issues that, a gynecologist can help with as well. The next point on that slide there, an occupational therapist. Now, this isn't something that you may have thought about straight away when you thought about who could help around issues with sex, but an occupational therapist can help navigate intimacy and sexual expression with sensitivity and empathy. They are healthcare providers who are knowledgeable about sexuality and can work with you to fully experience and enjoy sex. So anyone watching this who has an occupational therapist will know that they are very knowledgeable and trained in helping someone in their day-to-day life, whether that be getting around, doing as best they can in work and in school, all those sorts of things. And an occupational therapist is all about support in daily life of someone. And this is no different when it comes to sex as well. They are people who are very knowledgeable about equipment. So they may know equipment that is useful in the bedroom, whether that be for yourself or for yourself and your partner as well. It's not something I've done myself, but it would be something that is worth looking into. The last point on that slide there, sex therapists and psychologists as well can help you with any psychological and emotional issues that you may have around your sexuality. And so, sex therapists, psychologists, they are there to help you with the things that you're feeling in your head. And this is equally as important as the physical sensations and feelings and maybe challenges or problems that you're facing when it comes to sex. If your head isn't in a good place, or if you feel that you're dealing with body image issues, then working with a sex therapist or working with a psychologist can be really, really beneficial to getting over those issues. And the physical aspect of it may not be something that is an issue for you. It could be all emotional or psychological. So it's very important to consider those as well. And moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is essentially a list of resources that you may find useful when it comes to issues around sex as well. And some of these are disability specific, and some of them are not. So just to be aware of that. The first resource that is the guide that I mentioned near the beginning of the webinar is a guy called Andrew Gurza. He's a disability awareness consultant. He's also a sex and disability educator. And he is someone who I have a lot of respect for, and someone I admire as well. As I said before, he has a podcast called Disability After Dark. It's on Spotify and other platforms as well, I believe. So yeah, he's very, very knowledgeable, and he speaks to very, very knowledgeable people as well in this area. So he's definitely worth checking out. The next point is Pleasurable. It's a sexual device manual made for people with disabilities, and it's created to assist any race, gender, age, and sexual orientation with their sexual life. This isn't something I've used myself, but it looks like a very good resource, and looking for information and supports as well. Next point is a website called, it's www.belongto.org. This is a support and information service for LGBTQ young people in Ireland. So if you are someone who has spina bifida and or not, who doesn't have spina bifida, this website this service is a support. It's a go-to for people who may already be out, as they say, and a member of the LGBTQ community, or also someone who may be unsure of their sexuality or have questions or issues and not feeling totally supported in that way, or they may feel that they don't have maybe anyone at home or anyone in the friends group that they feel they can talk to confidentially about these things. So it is very important to have a confidential service to be able to do that. So Belong To is the organization to do that. Queer Ability is the next resource. Queer Ability is a LGBT and disabled rights advocacy group that is run by LGBTQ people with disabilities. And I'm not sure how much of an actual support they will be to someone in Ireland, because they are a US organization, but they may also be worth checking out as well. And they may be a good starting point and be able to point you in the right direction of the type of supports that you do need in Ireland. Okay, you can also check out the SBHI website as well for additional resources on issues with sex, and that there is quite a few resources there, which is great to see. And lastly, there are private Facebook groups on spina bifida and sex. I found those very useful over the years. They're essentially just private Facebook groups where someone can post a question confidentially. The people in the group can see who you are, but anyone outside the group cannot see who you are or what you're posting or talking about. So I feel that it's quite a good way to do that, and the vast majority of people will be people with spina bifida as well, who are dealing with these issues, and they may have some experience of the issue that you're having, or any other information that you might need. Okay, so just to recap, the physical implications of having spina bifida can impact your experience of sexuality. If the physical symptoms of spina bifida have impacted someone's sex life, this can then negatively affect their mental health. Thankfully, there are many supports out there for people with spina bifida that I've just spoken about as well. Okay, so that's just a quick recap. And yeah, so I just want to finish by saying thank you for watching this webinar, either live or recorded. It was a pleasure, and I hope you all learned something from it at the very least and enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it myself. So thank you very much again, and take care.
Thank you very much, Marcus. That was really interesting. And like from somebody who doesn't have spina bifida myself, it gave me a different perspective, and to be able to look at it differently, you know, it's very, very good. Thank you very much. And some great resources there at the end as well. So thank you very much for coming on today and giving that presentation. It was really appreciated. Now,
Thank you,
I'm
Katie.
thank you. I'm just going to take over presenter rights there again for 1 second.
Sure.
Now I'm just going to share, just to let everybody know that the next session, the next session for the last one for this year for the webinar series is with Hollister, and it's covering the topic of stoma care. So for anybody, and look, there might be some questions that are relating to this presentation that you gave as well that could be asked of the Hollister team. So thank you again, Marcus. I just want to throw it out there just in case anybody has any questions. I know a few people are still on there, and 1 or 2 people left as well. So any questions there for Marcus? A few people as well have asked me to send them on the recording. So Marcus, I'm just going to send those on afterwards as well. They had signed up for the session, but they couldn't actually attend, but they were quite interested in hearing chat today. So no questions have come in. So that's you've obviously got your topic across really, really well there. So I just want to thank you very much again. That